Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, Mrs. Lewis. Thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this parenting symposium this afternoon. Before I formally begin my presentation, I would like to express my congratulations to you on the publication of the Excellence Journal. I am certain that it is going to be a tool that really improves teaching and learning, and it reflects your continued contribution to education in this country. So thank you very much. Let's begin with all of the listeners with a bit of self-reflection. Make a real attempt to answer the following question in your mind. When you were a student, what were the challenges that affected your ability to study well? Really think about it. What are some of the answers? Maybe a lack of motivation, internal or external, a lack of strategic tools to make study easier, example, being unable to self-test, to manage time, procrastinating, dealing with limited resources. Maybe you didn't have a guide. Maybe you had to deal with a whole lot of work, meaning voluminous curricula. Possibly you were unable to connect with the material, even as far as being unable to make an emotional connection or being unaware of goals and how to even set them. How about just being plain lazy? That could be an answer, right? There are many reasons that may have been part of the answer to why we experience difficulty studying well or establishing an effective study routine. We have children of our own today, and what do we say to them? Do as I say and not as I do, or in this case, as I did. Our parental responsibility goes beyond this. Today, education has made a paradigm shift, and it will never return to what it was. Our children now learn entirely online or in blended or mixed models of online and face-to-face school. Yet, interestingly, the challenges they face to be able to study well remain relatively unchanged from our own experiences. Many of the answers we thought of earlier are similar to the issues being faced by our children today, and they can be exacerbated in this unmastered online environment. Amid these difficulties, as parents and as educators, our responsibility rests in being an effective guide in helping to create effective study routines. Today, let's attempt to provide a brief insight into how we can successfully manifest this role by examining the core elements that drive effective study habits and integrate the lessons that we learned from our own experiences possibly. Thereby, let's empower ourselves as parents with tools to best fulfill this role. So think again of the answers to that first question. If we analyze them, we can discover that effective study routines can be described as having three core elements. 1, time, 2, energy, and 3, attention. Let's take each one in turn. Time. I have so much to do, and I wish I had much more time to do it. Don't we hear that from the children? As a matter of fact, we say it ourselves. Although we more often hear ourselves saying, all that time you have to be on the phone, but no time to pick up the book, right? That sounds a little bit more like us. Well, we may get in trouble with that today because the book is on the phone. Time management is an issue that directly impacts the establishment of effective study routines. Do not be mistaken that students are not hard-pressed for time. They are bombarded with the demands of testing, multiple assignments for a host of subjects, SBAs for each one of them, projects. They are also sometimes faced with unreasonable deadlines. Regrettably, in this kind of environment, quality study time isn't given devoted effort, and completing homework and assignments get passed off as studying. Faced with a series of tasks calling for our attention at once, we need to develop the skill of prioritization. There are many practical tools that can help develop this. For example, David Allen suggests GTD, or Get Things Done. This approach uses a 5-step process of one capture, where children can note all the tasks, projects, and assignments they may have. To clarify, where we ask the question, are these items actionable or not? As well as, can some things on that list be done right away? 3, organize. This could be done under the headings of project, time, and context. 4, reflect. Here, children could review progress of the actionable items per week, and if they have set them, maybe even review their monthly short-term goals. And finally, 5, engage, where we roll up our sleeves and we get to work. So GTD is a time management technique that focuses on prioritization, because the items in the list are ordered from most actionable to least. This method is based on the philosophy that the brain functions better when it is thinking about ideas rather than just storing them. Therefore, GTD translates the many things to be done in the brain into an actionable list, so that space is freed up in the head to focus on the work itself. Another time management technique is an Eisenhower matrix, which is an urgent, important matrix. So we create a table of urgent, not urgent, important, not important, and fill in items in that box. This helps our children to focus on prioritization as well as priority items. Urgent and important tasks should be done immediately, like the SBA due tomorrow or the contribution to the group assignment that is yet to be done. But you will find that you could put many items under the category of not urgent but important, like studying for that test next week. These items call for planning. So in that example, for instance, the student could now plan to pay careful attention to how preparation for that test is going to be done, over how many days, and by using what strategies. Another technique that reinforces the connection between time and productivity is something known as the 1-3-5 approach. Here, the student picks one big thing, the main priority, 3 medium things, and 5 smaller things. So this kind of chunking helps us to chip away at the major thing that is likely to get us the best outcome. For example, working on a subject that happens to be their closest exam. You might have heard of the story of the professor who went into the classroom with a bucket, some rocks, sand, and water, and he started to fill the bucket with rocks to the brim. And he asked the students if it was filled, and it appeared to be. He then went on and he filled sand in the bucket, and it filled the spaces in between the rocks, and he asked them again. And finally, he went on to fill water in the remaining spaces and posed the question about what would have happened if he didn't start with the rocks first. A technique like 1-3-5 rests on a similar idea, where to better manage our time, we address the bigger issues first. We are in the digital age, and so keep our children engaged. Tech tools can be integrated with these techniques, like digital diaries, online trackers, to-do list apps on our phones, and so on. So in summary here, effectively managing time will lead to the creation of effective study routines. So that's time. What about energy? Second core element. What if we've managed our time, but when it comes to making use of it, we don't have the energy? We are lethargic, we are sleepy, or the brain finds it very difficult to be alert. Quality rest is important to developing a good study routine. Quality implies an appropriate amount of sleep and at appropriate times. It also means rest away from phones and tablets and the electromagnetic frequency that these devices tend to generate and that impact our quality of sleep. So to maximize the energy to make for an effective study routine, it means to cultivate lifelong habits like these. To further maximize this, when we study, proper eating habits play a fundamental role for energy. Students have to be encouraged to eat at appropriate times and to consume nourishing food. Children must also be taught how to regulate snacking. This should comprise brain and body enriching items. Just explore the biology online and you'll find many examples of types of foods that are welcome. But 1, the quality of the food that we eat. 2, how much we eat. And 3, the times that we eat will have a cumulative effect on the quality of our thoughts. And we know the adage, we are in fact what we eat. Food directly impacts the nature of our thinking, and studying is nothing but mental work. So as parents, particularly in the online environment, we have to be vigilant to guard against habits like unhealthy snacking while studying. These do nothing for an effective study routine. Yes, snacking while studying and consumption of water is important to fuel the brain, but quality cannot be compromised. Effective study routines have to be encouraged by good nutrition and exercise that maximize these energy potentials. But we are all aware that these habits don't develop miraculously. They take time and effort to take root. We have to consider energy as well in terms of when we study. If we are attempting to create an effective study routine, experiment a little with timing in order to determine when we are most effective. Some enjoy the quiet and the focus that early morning studies bring. There are, in fact, age-old benefits to this. If you've ever visited a monastery, for example, you'd know a great deal of attention is placed there on mental work and the development of focus. And there's a running theme, meaning that all of the residents arise early in the morning, and these times tend to be reserved for mental work, be it quiet study, be it reading, be it meditation, and so on. So support a culture of experimentation. Work with the child to understand what works best in terms of when he or she studies. But be mindful that what works best is not necessarily what is the easiest. It very rarely is. So we reiterate that in order to improve the energy available for an effective study routine, lifelong habits must be fostered. Finally, we come to attention, that third core element. So we've taken the time and the energy into account, but study becomes ineffective if we have managed to devote time and have energy, but we can't keep our attention on the task at hand. This is another skill that requires cultivation and repetition to become firmed up as a positive habit. In the online environment, students are faced with so many distractions. It's exponentially increased, be it the ping of the social media right next to them, or the many communication tools to chat with friends who very likely, let's face it, have things that are much more attention grabbing to say than anything you attempt to study in front of you. So an effective study routine is one whereby attention is focused on the task at hand for maximum productivity. The Pomodoro technique is a great tool to increase productivity. Here, activities are broken into 25-minute chunks separated by 5-minute breaks. The intervals are called the Pomodoros. The student can set a timer for 25 minutes, and when it rings, a check mark is placed on the paper. A 5-minute break is then taken, which is best taken away from the space set aside to study. And following this, the process is repeated. After about 4 or so Pomodoros, a longer break of about 30 minutes can be taken. So this technique helps us to apply directed effort in that 25-minute slot, knowing that a break is pending. It balances quantity and quality because the brain only needs to focus for a set amount of time. There are techniques similar to this, like the 52-17 method. Here, the clock is set for 52 minutes. Work for that time and take a break for 17. Some students might find this useful if they need to apply a little more time than 25 minutes, or they're in a zone, as they say, or they have a vibe going on, somewhat of an uninterrupted workflow, right? But be mindful. You see this thing called attention, be it for 25 minutes or 52 minutes or any amount of time, it has a very sneaky enemy, and that enemy is distraction. It will appear easily. Encourage our children to keep a distraction journal. So whatever thoughts clutter the mind while we attempt to focus, it can be written down. So we declutter the brain with those things and free up space again for the attention on the task at hand. But again, remember, the brain is a muscle, and practice makes perfect. These ideas require regular application for any kind of real benefit to be arrived. In this new online environment, student burnout is a real issue. Lack of interest occurs. There's no attention on the material. This could be because of lack of engagement. Maybe when the virtual lesson is delivered, there is no consideration to the social aspect of learning that goes along with it. So the student lacks a real connection in the form of an interest or desire or even a love for the subject matter. And parents, this is a dangerous situation. Because even as adults, our attention does not want to rest on something that we have no interest in, that we have no connection to. Here's where we have to use study tips to breathe some life into the content and take studying beyond merely reading. Encourage your children to write and rewrite material via note-taking apps or online presentations that they make. Let them create concept maps with online mapping tools. Let them generate summaries with flashcard software. Let them teach someone else. So encourage a virtual study buddy. All of these tips help us to enjoy pulling apart the material, enjoy the components, and enjoy putting them together again. Teach the students how to be reflective learners. Let them self-test with the tech tools. Let them use the mass of self-generated and user-generated online quizzes. Let them use online simulations of labs, experiments, maps, virtual tours to assess where they feel their learning is. So we are talking about creating effective study routines, which is truly the cultivation of a lifelong habit of being an effective learner. As parents and as educators, We must guide the development of 1, strong time management techniques, 2, energy harnessing tools, and 3, attention focusing strategies. So we have covered only some of these areas here, and I really hope you will explore some of these 3 core elements further. We've also touched on the kinds of study techniques that could improve the engagement that children have with the material itself. And as we go forward, let us continue, please, to be the guide on this side. They may be growing up, but though many times it is unasked, our children count on us for the kind of support needed to develop these kinds of positive routines. I wish all of you the best as you go forward in reimagining your parenting and developing children into bastions of this nation. Thank you very much for your attention.
Hi, I am Chanel Richards, proud mom of 3. I use the Excellence Journal to help track and also to have that dialogue with my kids on their day-to-day journey as they go along with their academics. It is a prompt to help us to understand what they achieve and what they understand from the day-to-day, as well as what challenges they have. But I can take, every month I could track it, and I could even have that conversation with their teacher and say, this is the situation. This is where my child is, having difficulties. What can we do next? So it's a planning, it's a strategic way of knowing what to do next. I will recommend the Excellence Journal for all parents, especially when you want to keep that healthy dialogue with your kids.